Hello, and welcome to today's special webinar event on what bot attacks look like and how to stop them. Today's webinar is sponsored by Cloudflare and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, there are a few things you should know about this webinar. First off, we want this to be a very educational event for you, so we encourage any and all questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we will discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. We have a link for getting started with Cloudflare, as well as a link to Cloudflare Radar to see the kind of intelligence you can get from Cloudflare. Those also include a link to the Guerrilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center, where you can find more fantastic events like this one. So I encourage you to check out those resources now and feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Visa gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. If you're watching this webinar on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. If you are the winner, you can choose to donate the value of that gift card to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media events, thousands of dollars have been donated to charity, so thank you in advance if you make that choice today. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found at actualtechmedia.com. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Dan Gould, who is Director of Product Marketing at Cloudflare, and we have Neil Patel, who is a Senior Technical Marketing Manager for Cloudflare. So Dan, great to have you here. Take it away.
Sounds good. Hey, thank you so much, Scott. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We advance slides here. Today, we're going to take a look at bot attacks and how to stop them. As Scott mentioned, my name is Dan from the product marketing team at Cloudflare, joined by my esteemed colleague, Neil Patel, who heads up technical marketing for us. Now, in our session, we will look at how bots attack and some very common evasions they use. We'll take a look at effective detection mechanisms for bots, and even how each and every request gets scored to determine if it's automated or not. And then, of course, we will culminate in a demo showing bots and our bot management solution in action. So it makes sense to start our bot conversation with a collective challenge we face together. And the long story short is that much of the internet is automated. Now, we all build our sites, web properties, applications for people, for human beings, but for better or for worse, they have to deal with a lot of bots. Now, the current number for the overall automated traffic we see on the internet is 44%. Now, you see 43% on the slide here, but since I made this slide, it ticked up a percentage point. So 44% of the internet is made up of bots. And as we look at this percentage over time, it's actually increased. And when we compared early 2020 with early 2021, we saw a 10% increase in bot traffic year over year. And of course, this means that our collective challenge with bots is not going away on its own. Now, this slide shows bots data from Cloudflare Radar. And as Scott mentioned, you'll see a link to the Radar site in your handouts portion of your dashboard. And again, Radar is our team led by data scientists who oversee a portal on internet trends and insights. And we, of course, keep a very close eye on the overall state of bot traffic on the internet. Now, a very common question that comes up, and I certainly had this question when I first saw this slide, is why the ups and downs on the chart? Why the undulations? And perhaps you've heard us talk about this before, but it turns out human beings, we sleep. We go to bed at night. We log off. And at that point, that means, of course, bots account for a larger percentage of overall internet traffic at night. And you can see this happens each and every day, accounting for the very consistent undulations each and every day. So Let's talk about bots themselves for a second. And of course, a bot, we think of a bot as really someone, a person who's making effective use of, say, a headless browser or some sort of, bot attack framework. And the truth is, as mitigations are put in place to slow down bots, attackers will make underlying adjustments to their bot automation tools to evade detection and to get around these mitigations. And really the net result here is that bots ultimately are pretty darn effective at evasions as they carry out the attacks. The bot attacks we're all familiar with, things like credential stuffing or content scraping or price scraping, which we'll see in our demo, inventory hoarding, credit card stuffing. The list of course goes on. And really prior to thinking about some of our bot detections, let's think about or look at how bot attackers look to evade mitigations, evade detections. And this really, like much else in security, ends up being a game of cat and mouse. And we'll take a look at some very actually straightforward ways in which bot attackers evade mitigations. For starters, they keep their IP addresses fresh, right? They'll rotate them, they'll use proxies to make sure that blocking by IP address is difficult. And I have to say, a lot of organizations come to us having tried manual mitigations with IP block lists. And really what happens is those block lists will prove to be effective for 2 to 3 hours or say 2 to 3 days. But soon enough, attackers will update, refresh, rotate their IP addresses, and it's back to the drawing board with the bot challenge. And they have to revisit this over and over. And oftentimes this means that teams managing these block lists have to revisit this multiple times a week to keep it fresh. And ultimately, the bot problem doesn't really go away. They just have to throw man hours at the problem. Attackers, of course, will also look to manipulate their request attributes. So this is things like rotating or spoofing the user agent or making sure the referring headers are what they should be, are accurate. And, for instance, an attacker certainly won't want to use a very conspicuous user agent like headless Chrome, because that is really a smoking gun and will be easily detected by a heuristics engine, right? And will get blocked. Now, of course, these attackers want to make their requests look very human. So they'll navigate like people, have random timeouts inserted. They will simulate mouse activity and clicks to make it look like it's a human being carrying out this activity. And then lastly, and this is really the most fundamental, they'll use automated tools like headless browsers and evasion packages to make sure that the activity is easy, it's automated, and it appears human-like. And they'll even use sort of stealth plugins to cover their tracks. Now, of course, it's clear that bots go to great lengths to avoid detection, to obfuscate what they're doing. So in turn, we layer our detections to catch them. And we wanted to look at how we scrutinize each and every request to determine whether it is a bot or not. And really the way our system works is that we look at every request that comes in the door. And we assign it a score on a scale, as you see on the slide here, from 1 to 99. And the score really comes from our detection engines, which we'll look at on the next slide, working together. And this ultimately lets organizations use bot analytics to build a very powerful bot management policy that's really finely tuned for their business and their traffic. Now, as we see here on the slide, lower scores mean something is automated. It's certainly a bot, right? Higher scores in the 90s, 99, mean it's human. And of course, we have a range in between. Now, in practice, when we're up and running protecting sites, our scores tend to bunch around the edges. We most certainly know the vast majority of things are bots, or we have a very, very high level of certainty that it's coming from a human being. So it's sort of a U-shaped score. Now, I should note, Neil will remind us here, in our demo today, we've actually very deliberately placed some scores in the middle. And so we can really showcase our powerful responses and challenges that we have baked into the product. Now, with the score in place, we can have a company or let a company set a policy that's enforced by bot analytics. And like an example is, say, we will block scores that have, or block requests that have scores less than 20. And then we'll challenge or capture scores from 20 to 29, right? That's a very common type of policy we can put in place using these bot analytics. Now, we get to this score using layered detections that all contribute to it. And of course, like in much else in security, we need layered detections or layered defenses, be it on the endpoints, be it for email, or in our case here, to detect and stop bots. So let's actually look at the complementary detection mechanisms we call on. We can see them on the slide here, that each produce their own scores, which we can combine to form the single score that bot analytics enforces on. And we should, start at the beginning on the left here with verified bots. These are good bots like Google and Bing. We want to, of course, make sure we allow list those so they can index our sites. We know that's foundational to business today. So we start by allowing the good bots. And then we move to our heuristics engine, which looks at request attributes and really compares them against a database of bad fingerprints, if you will, from all over the web that we maintain. And this can include things like user agents or TLS client hello fingerprints or HTTP2 signatures, those sorts of things. And we do this, we look at these heuristics or request attributes for tens of millions of sites we protect, basically all the sites that are behind Cloudflare. And we really look at and take note of each and every profile. And at that point, we record it, and when we notice a bad bot, we will block it, both in that individual instance and then block it across the board for all of our customers. So put another way, we will see a bot in one side of the world, note it, block it, and then make sure that every other global customer is protected against it, right? It's never a problem anywhere else. And as you know, we do this without sharing any private data. And the heuristics engine makes a yes or no decision. It either scores a bot as or request as 1, which is malicious, or it passes the request along to our next engine, which is anomaly detection. And this is really powerful because it runs and learns on an organization's particular traffic, particular site. So we train our anomaly detection, and it builds a site-specific traffic baseline that, of course, we can then compare traffic against to find outliers, right, against this traffic baseline. And this can detect things like even subtle spikes in traffic from a particular IP or something like that. Now, it's important to note, and this question comes up quite a bit, a customer might say, hey, our traffic looks very different the last week of November than it does in the last week of July. How do you account for that? And the truth is our baseline is rolling, and it's updated actually every hour, so it's always current. It always reflects the current state of your traffic. And what's more is we go to great lengths to keep this clean. We remove any unusual traffic or even bots that might have influenced this to keep our detections sharp. And much like heuristics, the anomaly detection engine flags requests with a score of 1 or passes it along. And that brings us to machine learning. And this is actually our most commonly used detection engine, if you will. The majority of bots we detect are scored with machine learning. And this runs across all of Cloudflare. And that means every site that relies on us is being trained by our machine learning. And so we have a ton of signal to train this. What's more, we actually have multiple machine learning models we maintain to make sure that the right machine learning model is in place for your site for the best detections. And if you're familiar with Cloudflare, this will not come as a shock. The machine learning engine really operates with no latency. So it's effectively, the performance impact is not there. It's negligible. And I should note the scoring here, machine learning generates a score between 2 and 99. And of course, that brings us to our last engine, which is JavaScript detections. And the JavaScript detections are a bit more active, if you will. Some of the other engines are somewhat more passive in that we're looking for outliers in traffic, or we're looking at the fingerprints of a request. Now, JavaScript is a bit more active in that when a request shows up, we will respond or challenge it with a touch of JavaScript. And this really scrutinizes the client further. And it tells us device class type data, browser, OS, that sort of thing. And it helps us very accurately detect spoofing and really lets us identify things like headless browsers that are being used in bot attacks. This engine has been used with very high efficacy and very, very, very few false positives. So it's something that's worked very, very well. Now, I should note, if this is not a particular organization's cup of tea, they don't want to do this, that it's optional. They merely keep it turned off. Now, much like heuristics and anomaly detection, JavaScript detections returns a score of 1 as malicious or it passes it on. So at this point, with this as our background, we're actually going to see bots in action. And so Neil is going to take it from here. He's going to share a screen and show us a really cool demo. So Neil, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, everybody. So, like Dan said, I'm going to take you through a live kind of showcase of bot management for Cloudflare. And I'll start with kind of saying, like Dan mentioned, we've kind of created the traffic to hit a profile that's not necessarily commonplace, but just for the purpose of the demonstration, it's kind of showing you the capabilities. And not only does it show you the detections, I would argue more importantly, it's showing you what you can do with the detections, right? It's all good and well knowing and understanding the bot environment as it relates to your domain or your web properties, but what do you do with that information? How do you act on it? What kind of rules can you make? Things like that. So to start, and kind of give you a lay of the land, there's a lot to look at here, but I'll just kind of take you through it step by step. On the far right, you have the asset that we're trying to protect. Right, this is a pricing page. Um, for example, in this case, it's online storage. But the idea here being, think about it like if you're a e-commerce resource or you're selling products, you do want to prevent bots from scraping that and monitoring your pricing all the time. Um, could be for any number of reasons, for scalping or for competitive pricing. When you get an uptick, the competitor puts an uptick, whatever the situation may be. But this is the asset we're protecting. So this is a very simple, web asset where the data is pulled in and it populates a page that says here are the prices for our product tiers. In the middle here, this screen is the dashboard. So I'm going to take you through a couple different things. What you're looking at here up front is the bot analytics dashboard. So I'm just giving you a summary without going into too much detail just yet about what the bot landscape looks like as it relates to your web property. You can see the types of hits that we found. And this screen right here is that U shape that Dan was referring to, the bot score distribution. Now, in my environment for the past 72 hours, I've been doing some weird stuff. And so you can see that there is, a little bubble in the middle here for the machine learning hits. In reality, with real internet traffic and with the domain out on the, global internet, your property is really going to be a U. There's going to be a very heavy conglomeration out at likely automated and a heavy conglomeration around likely human. And that gives you a really good ability to act on some of the scoring that machine learning engine gives you. Um, Further down, just a different representation of the data, right? Where is it coming from, some of the user agent information, and some of the path data. Um, Here is our main firewall dashboard. So the reason I'm bringing this up is so that you can see a little bit more in the details about the requests that we're hitting. So I can kind of show you the data that we collect and how you can read it and maybe use it in rule creation and etc. So with that, I'm going to take you through a couple different things. Now, what I've done, I'm not going to sit here and explain the small scripts for a Puppeteer that I've written to kind of do this, but I've built a few toolkits that will generate specific bot traffic by cycling proxy addresses and IP addresses in the backend and triggering specific parts of the engines for the purposes of demonstration, right? So the first thing I'm going to kind of just get to is heuristics. This is the engine that Dan was talking about. That's really just definitive, right? It's matching on fingerprints and patterns on the website or on the web request, user agent headers, where it's coming from, the way the requests are being made, the volume they're being made in, and you can see one of our proxies has gone down, but that's not a big deal because we did get a few hits in here. And what I'll do is I'll bring you into the dashboard so you can kind of see the result, right? So we made those requests from internet properties, and if we look at the firewall logs, you can see here we've got some new requests that just came in, and you can see we have hit on heuristic. So not only do we give you the bot score, we give you the engine that it matched on. So you can, you can take this, and we have other tools that kind of give you a bit of summary that you can work with support on to figure out exactly what the match was. Information that you can use to make a decision on what that traffic is if you think it's not the bot or the human that we think it is. You can see the rule that it matched on. This is just the logging rule, so we can see the data. You can see the user agent, the path it went to, and you can see for every request, I have a path to the style sheet as well as the root website. So good data that we get. You can use that to bolster and create a more specific or more precise rule if you wanted to. You can filter on it, you can exclude on it, so you can see the data in any form, right? So with that, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to do the ML engine. And this is just, again, taking the traffic and making the requests a little funky and a little unique. So they don't trigger on heuristics, but they're kind of matching that gray area. And when those requests come through, you'll see I'll let it keep doing its thing. I'm gonna refresh the screen here. We can see that we've got some more requests that have just come in, and you can see that we've got a bot score. So somewhere in the middle there, we've got a 59. Is it human? Is it not human? We've kind of took some, liberties and looked at it. Now I've got the bot kind of doing some other, funky things in there to give it a little bit of, like Dan said, Puppeteer was built as a way to validate and test your web application. So you can use it to do any number of things. You can feed the screen, you can screenshot it, you can feed data out of it and put it into a frame buffer. You can move the mouse, you can click, you can pull elements out of it. You can do any number of things. So we've got some machine learning hits right here. And you can see, again, same story, style sheet and the root HTML, and you've got bot score, right? So these are just a few of the toolkits that we have now. One of the things that Dan mentioned that I want to call it specifically is the line about verified bots. You might be thinking, okay, well, what if I just simulate a bot, like I'm a verified bot? Well, we don't just look at the basics of a verified bot like Google bot or something. So if I try to simulate a Google bot and I kind of create my user agent as such, I pull for the specific robot.txt file, I match criteria in that, and then I'm looking at the site structure. I'm trying to make myself look as close to a Google bot as possible. It's not just that, right? We're monitoring not just the request, but the profile. So how has this source, or how has this IP, or how has this requester behaved across not just one website or one domain, but the global set of intelligence that we have at Cloudflare, right? So just as a data point, I can show you that request that I tried to make right now with the Google bot generator. And if I go in, you can see my user agent was Googlebot. I was looking for data on the website. I was going through the tree. You can see, but I gave it a heuristic score of 1. This is definitely a bot. We know it's a bot. It's run through a headless browser. All of that stuff, that JavaScript section that Dan was saying. All of these things kind of conglomerate to make us very precise and accurate about things like verified bots. We don't want to create a loophole for legitimate or bad bots to come in through a legitimate doorway. So those were a few kind of tools and scripts that I wrote to generate some traffic and bot requests. Moving to some of the more interesting things that we can do with that information, right? So it's great, like I said, to identify and give you an understanding of all the kinds of requests that are coming in and what's going on with regards to the requests and the types of bots that we've identified. But how do you act on it? So what can you do when you want to actually enforce and protect against this? So a couple things. The first and the coolest thing really is you can manipulate this data to kind of show you just what you want to know. So this little range of 45 to 66, you can see things like the IPs it's coming from, the ASNs that are associated with it, and the user agents that are associated with it. So, these things are ways you can kind of tune and write your rule to prevent or block these resources just based on the volume you've been seeing over a certain period of time. To create that rule, simply just click create a firewall rule up here, and you can see it's already got the filter for your domain. You can add multiple expressions. So we can say that we want to do it for, we want to do it for, a bot score greater than, let's say, greater than, let's say, 25, and a bot score of less than 60. And that range, we're going to take an action on it. And that action is block, challenge with a JavaScript browser-based challenge or a capture challenge, allow the traffic, bypass inspection, or just log it. So a lot of good different options here. The ones I'm going to talk about a little bit further are JS challenge and capture challenge. So the idea behind creating a rule that challenges versus just straight out blocking is there may be situations where there are legitimate traffic that's getting hit on these rules, and you want to tune it and make sure that real users are not being interrupted. They're just kind of hindered a little bit, or they have the inconvenience of having to go through a challenge. JavaScript challenge just pokes some stuff back into the browser so that it validates to see if it's a real browser and the user is interacting with it, and then moves on. CAPTCHA challenge is the more traditional HCAPTCHA where you're selecting pictures. So if we take a look at the rules that I have in place here, I have a couple here, but the ones of note are the JS and the regular challenge here. So you can see here, there's a couple of pieces of information, the activity in the last 24 hours. So how many hits have we gotten? And then this point right here is the CAPTCHA solve rate. This is really useful in identifying how your rule is behaving in terms of whether it's real, you're hitting real users or you're hitting bots. And it kind of goes back to the point of why you'd want to CAPTCHA versus just outright block. You can see here that 6% of the hits on this rule are solving the CAPTCHA, which means that 6% is more than likely, barring any, corner cases, a human or somebody really trying to get to the resource having to, go through the challenge. So this is useful to tune the rule or identify whether or not you're accurately blocking the right kinds of traffic, your rule is written properly, right? So really useful toolkit here for identifying, real users in the weeds of, 45% bot traffic. So that's taking actions on rules. Now, this is the traditional kind of step. This is really what most solutions are going to give you. Where Cloudflare comes in and lets you be a little bit more creative and a little bit more control is with workers. So this is what Dan was alluding to. We're going to talk about a price scraping on example, and I'm going to go through that right now. So give me a moment. I'm going to restart a few things in the background, and we're going to actually go through this example of scraping our domain. Okay. So this website over here is our web resource. And like I was saying, with workers, what we can actually do is we can take the bot score of an incoming request and we can manipulate the response. The reason that's really useful is because you can feed bots garbage information, inaccurate information, sometimes information that'll crash them and force them to, break or stop their request flow, any number of things, because it's just free code. I can JavaScript whatever I want into the response. So I'm going to use a very simple example here. What you're looking at is the workers dashboard. And what I've done is I've set up, two domains for the same website through aliasing. So one is going to be protected by the worker and one is not going to be protected. And I'll show you the details of what that looks like in the real world in a moment. But you can see here, if I'm being pretty aggressive, and if I say that a request comes in with a score of less than 80, I'm going to go ahead and feed it garbage information. And that garbage information is just wrong pricing. So it's just extremely scaled up and inaccurate and could manipulate, the corresponding actions that a scraper might have after, it reads the data in from the resource. It makes it look like a successful response to the bot, but it's really getting incorrect or bad information. And it's really simple. I just have some, basic HTML that I'm going to send back if the score hits a certain point. Otherwise, I'm just going to send them back to the real resource. And so I'm kind of doing a little front scripting to protect the asset. Now, the shop.cftme.com, this is our standard website. Our website that is protected by our worker is called bot control. And this just demonstration purposes clearly, but you can see the resource is exactly the same. 25, 50, 150. I'm seeing the same exact data on both resources because I'm browsing as a human. I'm on a web browser. I'm not, breaking that threshold of 80. I'm not getting flagged as a bot. So over here, I'm going to do one test, which is I'm going to scrape both resources. I'm going to scrape the main shop and I'm going to scrape the protected shop. And I'm going to show you what happens. And I'm going to do a little bit deeper after that. So the resource that has the worker enabled, I'm scraping the prices, and you're seeing that my responses are 445, 845, and 1045. And I'm doing this in the same way that I did every other one, right? I'm cycling it through proxies, rotating IPs to see if it's coming from all over the world. And I'm getting the same result back for the domain or the resource that's protected by the worker. It's going to go through a second. But you can see here on the right hand side, my page is still showing 25, 50, and 150. However, the worker is triggering because we're hitting that score threshold and sending other data back. So if I do a scrape on the legitimate resource, which is just this, shop CFTME, you're going to see that I'm getting back the actual prices. I'm not getting back the 440 of the false pricing. And that's because this is actually hitting that rule. So another way to kind of show you this is if I use a explicit bot, which would essentially be a curl. Let me just go through and get the curl command back out. I'm just going to look on that bot control resource, and I'm going to look for the actual heading, which has the prices. This is just, curl is obviously going to hit as a bot because curl is a scripted method to make requests. When I run that request, you can see I'm live going to that domain, and in the raw content back, I'm getting these prices. However, on my main resource, if I go here and I refresh, I'm still getting 25, 50, and 150. That's essentially just showing you that this worker is sitting in front of the resource, and anytime it hits a request it gets a request that has that low bot score, I'm going to feed it garbage information. And that's one of the coolest things that you can do with bot management in Cloudflare, right? Not only can you do the standard, logging, blocking, challenging, but you have the ability to go in and manipulate the response. So you have much more fine-grained control over what you do, and you can manipulate that response on any scale. If you want it for a range of bot scores, if you only want it for low bot scores, for just a specific bot score, or any number of parameters that you can match. When we see that request come in, it'll hit workers, and we can look at any number of criteria in the headers and the content. And that gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of control. We've seen people do some creative stuff with this. In this example, I just fed it bad information, but if you monitored the bot, knew how it was operating, you could send stuff back that could theoretically break it or force it to crash. It really depends. The sky's the limit when it comes to customization on that front. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. Dan, I think we should be good to get into some of that Q&A and hopefully take some folks through some questions.
Sounds good. So Neil, before we dive into Q&A, so what we just saw, it is really powerful stuff. So basically, and I know, for example, we've had customers in the travel industry, right, where price scraping is very, very common. One of our customers will have their competitors build bots to scrape the prices to constantly attempt to undercut them on price. And what they've done using workers and bot management together is just like we saw Neil demonstrate. They serve dummy pricing back to screw up their bot initiatives, to undermine their competitors' bot initiatives, right? So this is very, very creative, powerful stuff that really we can very uniquely do at Cloudflare when we combine some of our serverless expertise with bot management. So really cool stuff. So that said, Neil, let's dive into some questions here. And let's see. So, and I think we've covered some of these to a degree, but it can't hurt to repeat them. Is there any way to stop the bot attack before it finishes its job? Right, and ultimately what we're doing here is we're recognizing bot activity and blocking them, or logging them, etc., as you choose, before bots can successfully connect and say scrape your data or carry out credential stuffing. So of course we see and recognize and stop bots before they're able to carry out their bot attacks. Anything to add to that, Neil?
No, that's exactly it, Dan. And there might be certain cases where you're keeping an eye on a request or a bot coming in, right? So you're monitoring continuous follow-up requests, and you can pipe the data that we pull out of bot management into any live alerting platform. You can keep an eye on it. You can interrupt it in the middle if you want to change the rule and change the action and terminate it as it's pulling those requests. Let's say, for example, to get all the data, it needs to make 15 or 20 GET requests to the page. You're watching it and you're seeing them come in. If that was a situation where you weren't actively blocking or stopping the traffic, you were just logging in Cloudflare, you could take an action in the middle or while it's going on. So exactly as you understand, any number of options, but in real world situations, you'd be terminating or blocking that bot based on the detection before it even starts.
Exactly. And here's another question. How effective is our bot management solution for basically developing preventative measures, it says, against bot attacks. And there are a couple of ways, and you'll chime in here. So for starters, we talked about the layer detections that we both discussed and saw in action, right? And of course, we've got layer detections because we know, like in many other areas of security, we want layers, right? Should a bot be able to, say, evade one layer, it will be caught by another secondary layer, right? These complementary detection measures, meaning that we're actually very, very good at detecting and stopping bots. What's more is when we think about effectiveness, it's really important to understand that effectiveness for one company might be slightly different for another. And that's why Neil showed us our bot analytics dashboard, right? And how we can really look at bot scores and develop the right challenges, the right responses for each and every bot score based on a company's particular needs. Because honestly, we could stop all the bots, but if we do that at the expense of business, right? We just like decimate a company's business with false positives. That's not a good solution, right? So we need to make sure that effectiveness also threads the needle very, very tightly between security and business.
Yeah, just add a little bit to that, Dan. Not only can you kind of use that to protect your environment, but you can use the data that we give you in the analytics dashboard to adapt what your web property may look like. If you're finding that there's excessive, bot activity to a specific endpoint or a specific path, maybe you adjust it up, or you don't keep more static like it really, you can use that data in any shape or form that you want to adapt and perhaps harden yourself against some bot attacks.
Totally, totally. And then there are a couple of questions here about deployments. How long does it typically take? How technical do you need to be? Do you need, a huge team? The answer is no. It does not take long at all. And, common application security deployments at Cloudflare, oftentimes they're very, a few hours, less than a day for sure to get up and running. And as I mentioned, like our anomaly detection engine, very powerful, trained on a company's particular traffic, particular site, that starts training within an hour. So within a few hours, you are really up and running with effective bot protections. And something that we've taken very seriously since the company's inception is not requiring the most technical expertise in the world. We have to hire, bring in tons of, say, professional services where, deep experts, charging hundreds of dollars an hour. That is not what we believe in at Cloudflare. So getting bot management up and running does not take long. We will help you with it, of course, with the deployment. So it doesn't require a ton of technical expertise, nor does it require a huge team to manage. In many cases, for smaller organizations, they will have one person managing much of their application security posture through the Cloudflare console. So it does not require a huge team. And then second, asking Neil, I'll kick this over to you about, does it matter, will bots protect any resources, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And yeah, it doesn't matter where your web asset or resource is hosted, right? That's one of the cool things about Cloudflare is we operate as a reverse proxy to anything that you may have. So if you're hosted in Azure, AWS, GCP, whatever it may be, we would essentially front that. And same goes for if you're hosted in a private data center or a shared colo. Regardless of the location of your web application, you can apply the same level of protection. And, going further into some of the Cloudflare offerings, you could diversify and split your web application across multiple resources, but you would still see the same bot management dashboard. So you're centrally controlling how bots, how you protect against bots across your entire architecture and your deployment, right? So it's not like you'd have one instance for on-prem and another instance for on-cloud. It'd all be uniform, agnostic of where it's deployed.
Yep, very much, very much. Good. Yeah. Somebody actually asked, and I think we covered this, what is bot analytics? How does it improve your security posture? And this is that dashboard that Neil showed us, right? Where we can see very rich information about all the requests coming in, how they're being scored, and then you can adjust your responses just so to make sure that you repel all bots, while of course making sure you thread the needle on business also and allow all the legitimate human traffic in business through. How does Cloudflare differentiate between good and malicious bots? Well, those are the detection mechanisms we spoke about. And this actually tees up a question that comes up quite a bit, is in those detection engines, Neil, right? We talk about something like heuristics, and say heuristics comes back with a score of 1, i.e. this is a recognized bot, the fingerprint for a recognized bad bot. At that point, do we just block it or do we pass it along?
Yeah, it's a great point, and the idea is, passive least resistance for us, right? We're gonna see a bot and we identify it based on a heuristics match. That's it. It's a bot. Heuristics is a definitive engine, 1 or 0, and that's what it's designed to be. It's that first layer of, if I can qualify and match this really quickly on a fingerprint, or its behavior, or its IP is coming from the user agent string, I have no reason to think about it any further. If it was a legitimate user matching a heuristic is a very, very rare case. Legitimate user is doing something wrong, or the way it's programmed is generally wrong. So yeah, absolutely, we would stop it right there and not need to go into any further detection. We would just stop that connection and we would log it right there.
And I hate to rehash what Neil's already showed us, but when we think about good and malicious, the flexibility that you see in the bot analytics dashboard is really important, because what might be absolutely malicious for one organization might be a bit of a gray area for another organization, and they may not want to block it outright, but rather use some of those flexible challenges, JavaScript, CAPTCHA, or maybe a worker type response. So we give organizations a lot of flexibility as they think about what's good and what's malicious. Now let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, so pricing comes up quite a bit. And we generally price on good requests. What we don't want to do is really punish somebody or penalize them for a sizable attack that targets them, so they would pay by the size of attack. We don't feel like that's the right way to do it. So we ultimately arrive at a number of requests, and you pay for those. Something else, let's see here. So there are different types of bot attacks: credential stuffing, credit card stuffing, card scraping, data hoarding, etc. Should your bot solution be expected to recognize and stop all types of bot attacks? The answer is yes, of course. So when you evaluate a bot management solution, it should be very effective at stopping all types of bots, regardless of the ultimate end attack they're carrying out. Let's see, I think that is actually it in the way of questions. So, with that, Scott, why don't we conclude there and hand it back over to you for the drawing?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, gentlemen. That's a really interesting presentation. That 44% figure, the percentage of web traffic that are bots, that was a striking number. And the demo really showed what a powerful tool Cloudflare can be for protecting your environment. So as a quick reminder, there is that link in the handout section for getting started with Cloudflare. And before we wrap up, we do have that one more piece of business. It's the $300 Visa gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that drawing is Fernando Noriega from California. Congratulations to Fernando. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Dan and Neil for putting together a really informative presentation and for all their insights in the Q&A as well. I'd also like to thank Cloudflare for making this event possible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank you all for attending and for your questions. So that concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.